Steffi, and this is going to be a reading vlog where I attempt to go through all of the finalists for the 2024 Hugo Awards that are going to be held at Worldcon in Glasgow this year. I'm sure if you're watching this, you're probably aware of all the controversy that surrounded last year's Hugo Awards, which came to light at the start of this year. In short, some bad actors on the organising committee for last year's Worldcon held in Chengdu in China decided to exclude people from the final ballot for somewhat arbitrary reasons. I'm obviously massively oversimplifying here, but that's the gist of it. The flip side of all of this chatter around the Hugo Awards was that I actually learn about the Hugo Awards. Like, obviously I knew they existed, but I think prior to all of the conversations, I didn't know that they're not some ultra exclusive awards that are decided by some kind of elite panel and are in fact decided by members of the World Science Fiction Society, membership to which is a very reasonable £45, or at least that's how much it was for this year. And this number becomes even more reasonable when you find out that members receive a voting packet of that year's finalists on the ballot in order to help inform their votes, and that includes the vast majority of the finalists, if I'm honest. And I did a rough calculation, like looking through and seeing how much the Kindle books, digital downloads of the films, the games, etc. would have cost, and for my £45 membership fee this year, the value of the voter packet alone was somewhere around, I'll put the exact figure on screen, but was somewhere around £500, which, I mean, I feel like that's very much money's worth. And I think there are a number of people who pay their dues simply to get access to this voter packet, because why not? And then further to this, the awards are being held in my country this year, so sign me up. At the point that this voting packet was made available this year, there were approximately 2 months before the voting closed, so I created an 8-week plan to set about reading, watching, consuming, and otherwise judging across the 20 categories, and this is the vlog of that. Before we jump to 2 months ago, just a wee bit of housekeeping. This video has been split into 2 parts. The first part is the vlog of my experience trying to make my way through all of these finalists, and then the second part is going to be a quickfire section where I give my thoughts and opinions on the 120 finalists. This is, as I say, very quick because 120 finalists, didn't want to ramble on too long. So if you are more interested in one or the other, this video should be chaptered so you can kind of jump around. And that's all I have to say for an intro, so let's jump to the past now. So there's 48 days left until the voting closes for the Hugo Awards, and I still have a lot of characters to go through. I did go through fan artists and professional artists last week, and like I think I know how I'm going to vote with those, but I'm rewatching all of Doctor Who so I can watch the Doctor Who episodes. So I've got a lot of that. I also have to watch, I think, 19 episodes of Star Trek because it's season 2, episodes 7 and 9. I think that are up for nomination. I don't know the phraseology. So like I've got a lot to watch that, and then it's like episode 3 of The Last of Us. So I've got a lot of like TV show to watch. My hope is that this week I can kind of catch up. So on my kind of schedule of things, I put best fan writer and best novelette for this week. I'm also going to try and see if I can do best dramatic presentation long form, and maybe graphic novel or comic. Is that what it's called? I can't remember the category title, but that one this week. So that's my hope. It's quite a lot to get done, but also like novelettes are pretty short. I'm hoping the graphic novels don't take me too long. And then films, like obviously I'm going to be engaging with them to try and decide how I'm going to vote, but they're a bit more of a relaxed activity, I feel like. So that's where we currently are. Hi. 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 Sorry, excuse the sort of shaky cam. I just don't have it in me to say it up because it felt like a really long day today. I feel like trying to go through all the Hugo nominees has been a bit of a learning curve this week. So, have I still got foundation on my nose? I don't know. I was filming earlier and I don't know if I've still got makeup all over my face or not. I tried, but I couldn't find any cotton rounds, so I had to just like, it doesn't matter. So yeah, it's been a bit of a learning curve this week because, as I said earlier, I'm trying to go through like a graphic novel. I'd like to have done dramatic presentation long form this week, but it's just been a bit chaotic. I also don't think I've watched much in the way of Doctor Who. So my primary focus this week has been reading Best Fan Writer and Best Novelette. I've read 3 novelettes in completion. I've read approximately half of On the Fox Roads, and I've read at least a little bit of 5 out of the 6 of the Fan Writer nominees. I think my feeling is that I need to approach it as I do the best I can with the time I have, which obviously I do that. But essentially, I'm thinking that I need to assign myself a finite number of hours, and then what I can read in that period of time is what forms my thoughts. And then at the end of this 8-week period, although I didn't really start looking at stuff until this week, so it's more like a 7-week period. Yeah, at the end of it, if I've got extra time, I can go back and look at things again. There are some categories that I've already put some thought into and are sort of approaching it in that way. Like things like Best Novel, Astounding Award, Lodestar, all of those kind of things. I'd already decided that I was going to do kind of 20 pages of each nominee at a time and just narrow it down that way. I will get more into that when it's the weeks where I'm looking at those categories, but I do feel like I've got a kind of plan. I definitely think, looking at things like fanzine, semi-prozine, etc., I definitely need to be giving myself a certain amount of time that I look at them and make a judgment. But I will say that what I've learned this week is that I can judge fairly early if something's working for me or not. Like, the more I can read to inform my decision, the better. But for example, with Fan Writer, like, I felt... So the first one was a bit different because, like, he writes different things and it took me, like, a minute to kind of get through and get a feel for it. But the second one didn't give too much to work on, so I was able just to read everything they provided. And then the third person did not vibe with at all. I knew very quickly that I wasn't vibing with them. And like I had some other critiques about their kind of writing style. And then yesterday I had a bit of a day where I didn't have that much time. So I didn't get a chance to read a lot from him. But I got a really good feel for his writing style from the very small amount that I'd read. And the same for today. Like, I've still got a bit more time to go back and read a bit more. But, like, I've got a good feel of writing style and I feel like I can make an informed decision. And then, actually, it's the same for novelette. So, On the Fox Roads, I've not read too much of, but I already feel like I know how I would place it compared to the others. But then also it's an incredibly strong category with some fantastic nominees, and like it's possibly going to be a little bit difficult to decide how I vote, and that's not a bad thing. To have a category that's so stacked where I genuinely feel like multiple entrants could quite happily take the award, that's a really good thing. And it's a really fantastic thing for readers to have that, wealth of amazing reading materials. Back to it now, I guess. Hello. Welcome to week 3. I mean, I don't know if I've been counting last week as week 1 or week 2, but according to my original plan, this is week 3. Why are my fingers? I don't know. Sorry. So this is week 3. On the plan for this week, officially, we've got best related work and best novella. And of the best novellas, I've already read Thornhedge, which means I've only got 5 novellas to read this week. And it equates to just under 500 pages. So I think my plan is that I'm going to be doing 1 novella a day. And if I don't get it finished, then I just move on to the next one the next day. Because that seemed to work last week with Novelette. I did finish all except On the Fox Roads. And if I have time before voting closes, I will go back and finish On the Fox Roads. But I realised that, not just Novelette, but also with the category of fan writer, I reached a certain point where I felt like I got a feel for the writing, the work, etc. And I could kind of compare and contrast against each other. I think it's interesting from a reader perspective where you're kind of going, okay, so I do tend to know what I like fairly early on. So if I'm not enjoying a book, then yeah, I should be DNFing it. I'm not saying that about this. I'm saying about my reading in general, that I can judge fairly early on if something's working for me or not. So it's not really worth me continuing something if I already know it's not working for me. Yeah, so anyway, the plan is each day I'm assigned a specific novella, and if I don't finish it in the day, hopefully I'll get a chance to finish it before voting closes. But the thing that I learned last week was it's all about forward momentum. If I don't finish reading all of the stuff for a person or the pages for a book, just move on to the next one the next day. It is going to work a little bit differently when I get onto full-length novels, which I guess we will start to talk about this week, because for the category of best related work, I've had a look through and seen what I've got, and The Culture, the Drawings by Ian M. Banks, they didn't provide any stuff in the voter packet, which is completely their prerogative, but I literally cannot track down a copy, even if I wanted to pay out of pocket for a copy. When I had a look at trying to get one online, it wasn't going to arrive until between September and December, which is obviously way after the voting closes. So for that, I honestly don't know, but I'm in a similar position but slightly different with sorry, I'm having a look at my notes, with Chinese science fiction and oral history, in that it is in Chinese and they've provided no resources translated. I'm not saying that I expect them to do that, but because everything they've provided is in Chinese, I don't think there's a way for me to be able to compare and contrast and assess against the other things, because I don't speak Chinese. Yes, I could use a translator, but I don't think that's going to give a fair representation of the work. So I basically decided that for anything where I've only got things in Chinese, which I think is only a couple of things. I think there's one story, maybe, and then there's this, and then there's an editor that only edits in Chinese, but I'm pretty sure they also included a statement about their editing style that had been translated into English, so at least I have something to base my my votes off. So yeah, so that takes related work down to 4, and then Discover X I think is like primarily a series of videos online, and then Travel in Time we've got a 35-page extract, so I decided I'm going to group those both together, and then the remaining 2 works, which is All These Worlds and A City on Mars, I'm going to do a thing where like I switch between them, so I haven't decided exactly like how many pages or if I'm going to do it chapter by chapter, but essentially for the remaining 4 days of the week, or until I feel like I can make a judgment about how I would rank them relative to the other things in the character in the category and to each other, I'm going to switch between them. So it might be a case of I read a chapter of All These Worlds and a chapter of City on Mars and just keep bouncing between them. I think that's going to be a bit of a learning curve today, but that is the plan for Tuesday through Friday. And essentially I've decided that, I mean, it's probably not going to work every week, but I really want to be in a position where I'm only working on this 5 days a week, because I'm very concerned that I'm going to burn out, because this is so much stuff to get through in such a short period of time, like 8 weeks to get through 120 works. And yeah, some nominees didn't provide anything, and some of it is a little bit more chill than others, but still like 120 things. And I think there's 7, 8. There's a few categories that are actually like bookish rather than like, I don't know if this makes sense, but like I've kind of split it where you've got, I guess it's like fiction and then like everything else, like fiction books and everything else. Oh, sorry, I'm getting really like rambly. So those are the kind of official things for this week. And then in the background, I'm also continuing to try and work through getting all the backlist episodes of the TV shows watched so that I can look at best dramatic presentation short form. I still would like to, well, I still need to watch the films for best dramatic presentation long form. And I mean, I don't know when I'm going to squeeze in the games, but you know, I've got a couple of games at some point. And then what else? I am almost done with best graphic novel or story category, and I'm sure I'll fill you in later on like my thoughts and feelings on that. But I did look up how to pronounce this title, but and I struggle. I am about 200 pages into Shabik Lubik and really, really enjoying it. And then after that, I've got the 3 Body Problem Part 1, and that'll be me done for graphic novels. And excitingly, I do have some thoughts and feelings on them. So first thing I'm going to do today is my Kindle needs to charge up a bit, so I'm going to work on Discover X and then just plod through everything else. I don't know how much I'll be checking in throughout this week, but I guess see you in a bit. Hello and welcome to week 4 of me trying to make my way through every single nominee for the Hugo Awards. Updates. So week 3 was best related work and best novella, I didn't finish a single novella last week, but I feel like I read enough of each novella to be able to make a judgment, or at least feel, like 85-90% confident in my judgment. But I do have a running list of, if I have time, like these are things that I could go back and review and like read more of later. So novellas was an interesting one because it was just a complete mixed bunch. And I mean, again, I'm sure I'll have more thoughts later in this video, perhaps. I don't know. I think what I might do is at the end of this video, I'll do like whistle stop opinions of everything. Yeah, so that was novella, and then related work. There was 2 entrants that I just couldn't read like anything from, because one was in Chinese and one I just, like, I think I said earlier in the video, like, they didn't send across anything, as is their prerogative, and I wouldn't have been able to get a copy until after the voting closes. And I'm just gonna like review the section because I can't think what else was in this. Oh yeah, so one of them was YouTube videos, and unfortunately it just didn't quite work for me, so that was pretty quickly put out of the road. One of them was a sampler that I didn't enjoy, so it came down to A City on Mars and All These Worlds, which were both pretty strong contenders. And I just like flipped between them for the remainder of the week. I also managed to get to the end of season 3 of Doctor Who. So, only another 9 seasons to go. In 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I don't know what is time. And I finally watched Barbie. So that's 1 out of the 6 of the films watched now. And I finished the graphic novels and comic category. So I am making progress slowly but surely. This week we are doing Best Editor Short Form and Best Novel. I feel relatively confident in my plan for Best Novel. So I've read 2 of the nominees already, so I don't need to worry about them this week. And then of the 4 nominees remaining, my plan is basically that each day I read 120 pages. And if I'm able to whittle down the number of like a favourite or preference or whatever as the week goes on, I still read 120 pages a day, but I just read more of each individual nominee, if that makes sense. So if I've got 4, I'm reading 30 pages of each. If I've got 3, I'm reading 40 pages. If I've got 2, I'm reading 60 pages. I hope that makes sense. And hopefully 5 days will be enough to kind of narrow it down. So yeah, that's my plan for novel. And then for Best Editor Short Form, I'm not really sure what I'm looking for when it comes to editors. So the first thing I'm going to do is read all of the statements that the nominees have provided, and then I'll probably just kind of slowly but surely work my way through the stuff that they have provided. There are 2 of the editors who I think they only edit work in Chinese, so I've got a statement in English, but I've got none of the work they've edited, or like it wouldn't be fair to try and get a translation, because it's not going to be as accurate as it's not going to show their capability as an editor, because internet translations are known to be a bit rubbish. I hope I'm making sense. So basically I will have 4 nominees in this category to go through this week. So probably what I'm going to do is say today is for the statements, and then for the 4 remaining days of the week, I do 1 of the nominees each day, and hopefully I come to a conclusion by the end of the week. As I say, I'm not really sure what I'm looking at, because how do you judge an editor? But I'm cautiously excited for this week, even though I think it's going to be a fair bit of work. Hey! It is day 3 of week 4. I haven't started my reading for today, but So this week I'm working on editor short form and just massively overwhelmed. But I think the approach I'm taking is basically to read through the editorial philosophy statements that have been provided, because a couple of them actually didn't really provide a philosophy statement. And then based on what they've said in their statement, look at a sample of their work. There's no way I can possibly read through all of the samples because I'm quite a slow reader and I'm only human and I've only got 5 days. Or I'm only giving myself 5 days to make my way through it, because at the end of the day there's 120 nominees across 20 categories to assess, and I've got 8 weeks to do this, so it's a lot. Anyway, so that's how I'm approaching that. Feeling a bit out of my depth, but at the end of the day, it's not that deep. It's a popular vote. It'll be what it'll be, and I just know in myself I want to feel confident about my votes. Now, about best novel, which is the other category I'm doing this week. Sorry, I really should just put this on a tripod because ouch. Is that good? That'll do. Sorry, I'm just an idiot and not putting on a tripod. So the other category is best novel. And the 4 books that I hadn't read yet are all really good contenders. I think, interestingly enough, the 2 books I had read are the 2 books that I feel like are the lowest. And then there's a gap, and then it's 3rd and 4th, and then 1st and 2nd. So having read the first 60 pages of those 4 books that I hadn't read before this week, I feel like the number 1 and 2 position, I don't know which order, but the 2 books in number 1 and 2 feel quite clear to me, and then the 3 and 4 feel quite clear. But I wanted to give the 3rd and 4th another day's worth of reading to just be sure. But I've decided that actually the best way to do it, because it's going to be hard to decide between my top 2, is to do 15 pages of each of the ones that I've got in 3rd and 4th, so that's 30 pages, and then do 45 pages of each of the ones I've got in 1st and 2nd, so that takes it up to the 120. This is why I picked 120 pages, because it just divides so beautifully. So that is my plan for the day. It would be amazing if I actually felt like I got my rankings sorted for that category today, but also I am giving myself the full 5 days if I need them, and I definitely am going to want to finish, I think, all 4 in this category. Honestly, I just won't have a chance to finish them this week, I don't think, if that makes sense. I don't know, I need to get reading though. Hello, and welcome to week 5 of Effie desperately tries to read, watch, consume everything that's been nominated for the Hugos this year, or at least is on the final ballot. So we are halfway through my 8-week plan to try and get through everything, and I do feel like I've kind of found my stride, but I also think these last 4 weeks are going to be really quite intense, because I've got best series, best long form editor, astounding achievement, YA, and then I've also got semi-prozine. Let me have a look at my list and see what else I've got left. Oh yeah, fanzine as well, and fancast. So it's going to be a lot of work still, but I do feel like I've kind of gotten to grips with knowing that I can read a certain chunk and I'll be like, yes, I know how I'm going to rank these. And it's been really helpful for me to sort of get to grips a bit more with like my own reading taste, because I'm like, well, if I'm not enjoying it, I'm not enjoying it. And I'm fairly free with DNFs anyway, but I think this might actually make me even more of a person who DNFs things, because life's way too short to read things you're not vibing with. So, in addition to the fact that I still need to do game, dramatic presentation, long form, I think that's what it's called, and dramatic presentation short form, which I'm sort of working away in the background. I think they were meant to be in week 1, but I didn't really get much done in week 1. Well, so for dramatic presentation short form, because I've got to like get caught up on Doctor Who and, you know, watch 19 episodes of the Star Trek, like the newest Star Trek TV show, and I've got to watch some of The Last of Us. Like, it's a lot of content to get through to get to the stuff that's been nominated. So that's a project I'm doing over the whole 8 weeks. I'm nervous about actually managing to achieve it. The Doctor Who was the biggest thing, because I think I need to watch like 200 odd episodes, and I'm currently on series 6, I think. But we'll see. Anyway, so this week is like the primary focuses a short story and long form editor. For long form editor, I'm going to take my best friend's advice, and for each person in the category, I've picked the book that most appeals to me, and then I'm going to just compare those books against each other. Like, I think all of the editors have submitted statements, so I will kind of be keeping an eye out for the things that they've mentioned in their statements and seeing if that's reflected in the writing. But ultimately, you know when an editor's bad. Like, I think as a reader, you tend to be like, yes, this could have used an editor, but I don't necessarily know like what a good editor looks like. And I think that's the point. A good editor is going to be near enough invisible. So ultimately, what I'm going to do is just rank the books this week, you know, on how much I enjoy them. And obviously, if something comes up that feels like an obviously like poor editor, then that's going to rank it lower. But it's just going to be a case of like I'll rank them based on, you know, book I enjoyed most to book I enjoyed least, and that's just what I'm going to have to do. A couple of the editors I have read from before, so that will also come into play as well. But yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out. The fun thing is that I do have a couple of books this week in audiobook form, or at least like to track down books for this week. I've, you know, it's been as audiobooks. I'm particularly excited for, I think it's Lindsay Hall was the editor of Arch Conspirator by Veronica Roth. And as someone who absolutely adores the story of Antigone, it's been something I've been desperate to read. So I'm really excited to read Arch Conspirator this week. I may or may not pop in this week. I know I've been kind of in and out, but honestly, like, I'm vlogging for 8 weeks. I think it would possibly be a bit extreme if I was checking in, you know, every day, etc., etc. So you may see me more this week. Probably you will see me more this week. But if not, I guess I'll see you for week 6. Hi! Just another quick update. I feel like I'm constantly doing quick updates, except I'm literally incapable of ever being quick in an update. So it's the end of week 5, or near enough the end of week 5. Well, no, my weeks run until Saturday and it's now Friday. But I managed to get this week's Hugo stuff done relatively quickly, because I was doing like long form editor, and I realised that like I'd read books from most of the editors already, so I was able to like come up with my thoughts quite quickly. And then obviously short stories don't take too long to do. So I was finished up by the end of Wednesday, I think it was. Or was it? No. Was it yesterday? I think like I was finished up with the editors, I think on Wednesday. And then yesterday I read the rest of the short stories. So I was done for the week. And I was like, okay, well, in the category of Astounding Award for New Author, I think it's called, I'd already read 3 of the entrants prior to getting the voting packet. Or in fact, like prior to the start of this year. Because I read Book Eaters as an arc, I think. And then, like, Iron Widow, I think I read when I got the Illumicrate edition, and it was, like, my favourite book of that year. And then God Killer, I read for Summerween last year. Gosh, it's been a year then. So, like, I'd read 3 of them already. So I had a 12-page short story from Ai Zhang to read called Give Me English. So obviously that didn't take me any time to read. And then I was like, okay, so I need to read from MX Liu and Monoquill Black Goose. So I've now listened to bits of audiobooks by MX Liu, and this evening, before I finish up for the day, I'm going to read some of To Shape a Dragon's Breath, and that'll be Astounding Award read, which means I've got 2 like bookish categories and like 2 sort of other stuff categories to do. So I've slightly changed my plan for the Hugos. Bear with me a sec whilst I get my folder out and tell you what my plan is. Okay, so I have now basically given myself a buffer week, like not quite, but what I'm doing is I still need to finish up both dramatic presentation categories, and I also need to do the game category, but I'm going to be working on that for the next 3 weeks. So week 6, I'm going to do semi-prozine and series. Week 7 will be Fancast and Lodestar. And then week 8 is going to be fanzine, but also it's going to be a buffer week where if the categories were feeling a bit tight, I can like go back and read more, because I think very few of the categories I've been able to read like the whole thing just because of time limitations. So it should be a fairly chilled, enjoyable week. I mean, the thing is, if I feel comfortable enough voting earlier, I can put my votes all down. And then the good thing about the Hugos is you can just go in and change them right up until the deadline, which is like around about 8 p.m. on the 20th of July. Like, I can't believe I've only got 3 weeks left. Like, it feels simultaneously like quite a lot of time, and like it's going really quickly. So yeah, I'm really excited. And so I'm splitting week 6 because end of the month filming stuff I'm going to be doing like at the start of July. So I'm going to do 2 days. So I'm going to do like Saturday and Sunday is going to be like the start of week 6. And then I'm going to take Monday and Tuesday off Hugo stuff. And then I'm going to do Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then it'll be back to my weekends being my days off. But yeah, this has been such a good journey, and I'm so glad I did it, and I'm definitely gonna like keep doing this. I think this might be a regular thing for me, is to like try and do the Hugo Award stuff, because this has been surprisingly enjoyable, and I love how much I've been discovering of new authors. And I'm excited, very nervous because agoraphobia. But I am excited for Worldcon and the Hugos in August. Just a quick update, because we're at the end of week 6. I actually finished all my week 6 stuff a day early, which is nice. I think I'm going to try and like squeeze most of what's left into next week so that I have like a free buffer week at the end. What I'm not going to try and squeeze in is games and dramatic presentation, both long form and short form. Like, I'm still chipping away, getting through Doctor Who and the other TV shows. I just don't think it's like practical or even a sensible thing to try and like get it done by the end of next week. So what I'm going to try and get done is the YA one, which I think is not technically Hugo, but we're not being pedants here. Fancast and fanzine. So I think like that shouldn't be too bad. My biggest concern is for the YA category. I need to read books 1 and 2 in the Charlie Jane Anders. I don't know what the series is called. Is it Victory's Greater Than Death? I don't know. I need to read book 1 and 2 in that series. And I also need to read The Left-Handed Booksellers of London before I can like read the books in the YA category. Like, I can read the other 3 that I haven't read any of yet, but I can't read the final book in the Charlie Jane Anders trilogy, or I don't think I can read the Sinister Booksellers of Bath. But it's fine. I'll get there eventually somehow. But I am also a wee bit sick. I'm hoping it's not too bad and I can keep pushing through. I'm very excited and a bit, I don't know what is time, that we've only got 2 weeks left. But it's going to be here before we know it, I think. Well, turns out I messed up my maths. So I did a calculation of how many pages I needed to read each day of Victory's Greater Than Death and the one that comes after. So I've been like keeping a track of that so that I could get that finished before, I think it's Promises Stronger Than Darkness is the third book, before I read that. But then I was thinking the maths is not mathsing, because I think I thought I needed to read like 14% a day, but I was like, that can't add up right, because I want it finished by Friday. Yeah, turns out my calculations were based on me finishing it before like the voting ended, which would have given me an extra week, which is why the maths wasn't mathsing. So I've now realised that I need to read near enough 90 pages a day of those books to get them finished in time, which is a lot more intimidating, especially because even though they say they're quite short books, like I think the first one says it's 288 pages and the second one says it's like 300, they take forever. So I'm presuming that in their physical format it's really tiny font. But like, there's no way I can feasibly read near enough 90 pages a day of those books on top of doing other things and on top of having a bug at the moment. So I think what I'm going to do is actually not start my week 7 of things until I've finished those 2 books. So hopefully it'll only mean that I need to take an extra couple of days, but I'm not sure, because they feel like they are taking absolutely ages. I think I'm maybe around like the 28% mark, and my Kindle reckons it's going to take me 6 hours to finish this book, which feels so instinctively wrong. So I'm just hopping in with a very quick update to basically say I haven't done much. I don't know if I mentioned that I was getting ill before, but I think when I last filmed an update was like just before I started getting, like, I say really ill, that's hyperbole. Like, it's a cold, I think. All of our like COVID testing kits are out of date, so I can't tell you if it's anything more than a cold, but I do know that my partner lost his sense of taste when he had it, so potentially it wasn't just a cold. But anyway, I started getting more and more run down to the point that like I wasn't sleeping, and like that had a really massive impact on me. Like I don't sleep amazingly well anyway. Like I have to take medication so that I can sleep. That's beside the point. Anyway, it's Wednesday now. I think it's Wednesday, which means that if we're sticking to like the original structure of my weeks, we've got Thursday, Friday, Saturday left of week 7. And again, I can't remember what I said in my last update, but I wanted to be kind of done by the end of week 7 so that week 8 could be, going back and double checking my thoughts on some of the categories that felt a bit closer. That's not going to happen, I don't think. I have made a lot more progress in the dramatic presentation short form category. I have watched all 13 seasons of Doctor Who, so the next time I watch Doctor Who will be to watch the 3 specials, of which 2 of them are nominated in the short form category. I've also watched the first 16 episodes of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, so the next time I'll watch that, I'll be to watch episode 7, which is nominated, episode 8, which isn't, but obviously chronology, and then episode 9, which is nominated. So, like, that's pretty good going. And then I also need to watch the first 3 episodes of The Last of Us, because episode 3 is nominated, and the first episode of Loki. So I feel cautiously optimistic that I'll at least have that done by the end of the week. And then I've got to watch 5 films, which, should be fairly chill, to be honest. It feels a lot more manageable, 5 films, than like 13 seasons of Doctor Who, for example. I mean, I'll be completely honest. In terms of the categories that I've got left that I have to read things for, I feel like fanzine and fancast, I'm probably not going to have particularly strong feelings on. Like, I will look at them and I will judge them and rank them and stuff, but, it's not that deep. It's a popular vote awards. But I also think it's one of the categories that I'm not super invested in. I think I'm a lot more invested in like the very bookish categories, like, best series, best new author, etc., etc. I know not all of them are technically Hugo awards, but like we group them all together because they do get grouped together on the ballot. So it's really more the Lodestar YA category that I'm particularly bothered about. But I'm having a really hard time, not because I think the books are necessarily bad, but just because they're feeling like they're taking me longer to get through. The Charlie Jane Anders books. So it might be a case of I might not be up to book 3 by the time I have to place my votes. So I might just have to judge based on what I've read so far this series, which is not great, but I do what I can. I did look and see if I could get copies of the audiobooks or any of them, and unfortunately, no. Sorry, this has been a longer update than I expected. I'm hoping to get back on it with the Hugo stuff tomorrow, but if all I do is finish up the dramatic presentation short form category, honestly, I'm going to take that as a win. Hi, this is, I guess, technically the first day of week 8. It's Sunday and voting closes around 8 p.m. next Saturday. So we are in the final stretch, and I'm starting to over the past day or two, I've been starting to feel a bit better. Obviously, whilst I've been ill, I've been taking advantage. Well, not taking advantage. All I could do was watch things and cross stitch. But I've basically managed to get myself to a point where I've got 3 episodes for dramatic presentation short form to watch, which I guess sounds like not that impressive when you think about the fact that like it's 6 nominees, so it's 6 episodes, but to get to that point I had to watch like 16 episodes of Star Trek and like 200 episodes of Doctor Who. So to be down to the final 3 episodes is pretty exciting. So I'm expecting to finish that today, which means that I think
Oh no!
Sorry, lost my train of thought there when I ran out of storage. So what I was saying is I'll get the dramatic presentation short form finished today. And then I think my plan is to watch, so I've got 5 movies left to watch for dramatic presentation short form. So to watch one of those a night for like Monday to Friday. And that'll be all the watch stuff done before voting closes, which is really exciting. In terms of other categories, I still need to look at game. I wasn't going to stress myself out too much, but I literally a couple of days ago got an email with a game key for one of the games, which means that I've now got keys for 3 out of the 6 games. So I want to try and carve out some time to play those games this week. Like, you know, it makes sense to try and do that, but it's trying to carve out the time, because when I only had 2 game keys, I was like, like it's, I don't know, like mentally it felt a bit different to just be comparing like those 2. But now that I've got 3, so I've got 50% of the games, it feels like I should actually carve out some time to play them. Or at least like I want to do that. And then in terms of other categories, I've got to do Fancast, Fanzine and Lodestar. For Lodestar, I'd like to look at the Charlie Jane Anders book and the Garth Nix book, but since they are sequels in a series, I'm kind of putting them to one side, and if I can have a look at them, great, but I'm very aware that I've got less than a week left now, so I'm going to focus on, well, I was going to say the other 4, but I've obviously already read some of To Shape a Dragon's Breath, so I've got 3 books to look at in the Lodestar category to get a feel, really. And then obviously I've got like the whole of Fanzine and Fancast. So my plan, like bearing in mind that the intention for week 8 was always to narrow down, so I can spend like, Tuesday to Saturday narrowing down. I'm going to spend Monday, I think I've allocated like 8 hours to do so, going through all of the nominees for Fancast, Fanzine and Lodestar and just deciding how I feel about those. And then, as I say, Tuesday to Saturday, I can go through and narrow down if I feel like it's a harder decision for me. So I think ultimately what's going to happen on Monday is I do half an hour each for each of the fanzine, half an hour each for each of the fancast, and then an hour each for the 3 Lodestar books. But I mean, we will see how it all shakes out, but that is my provisional plan at the moment. I can't believe the end is in sight. It's really exciting, but also it feels like it's passed kind of quickly. I don't know. It's been a fun experience. I don't think I'd ever do it to this extent again, but I have really enjoyed discovering a lot of new things and reading and watching things I possibly wouldn't have picked up otherwise. Hello. With less than 48 hours left until voting closes, I think I'm near enough hit a wall when it comes to watching, reviewing, assessing everything for the awards. I mean, I think I did pretty well. I would say that realistically, the game category, I wish I could have had a bit more time with, and I may still explore a bit more. I'm not quite done with the film category, but I will be. Like, the film category is the category I feel most chill about. I mean, it's technically called dramatic presentation, long form. But I think Lodestar, which I don't think Lodestar is actually technically a Hugo Award. I think it's a separate thing, but it's on the same ballot. But I think the Lodestar is the one that I wish I hadn't reached my limit with yet, because like even if I spent like every waking hour reading for the next, so it's like almost 11 o'clock on Thursday and voting closes at 8 something p.m. on Saturday. So we'll say like a day and a half. Even if I spent like every waking hour between now and then reading, I wouldn't be able to, like, I probably wouldn't even be able to get onto book 3 of Charlie Jane Anders. I think the series is called Unstoppable, and book 2 of Garth Nix's series that I don't know what it's called. Something about booksellers, I'm going to say. So, yeah, I wish I could have spent a bit more time digging into that category, but considering by the time voting closes, it's really going to be only that category that I haven't had much time to look into. Like, games, my back's decided to play up, so playing games on my laptop's not necessarily going to happen. Like, I'm going to try and carve out some time, but I'm in a lot of pain when I try to sit at my laptop, so I may not be able to do it. But yeah, the game category, I've at least looked through all of the notes that all the nominees sent across. So, like, I feel reasonable about that. Film, dramatic presentation, long form. I have 2 films left to watch, but I haven't watched Into the Spider-Verse, so I need to watch that before I watch Across the Spider-Verse. So yeah, like, I think I've done pretty well. I think there'll be one more vlog update when I've basically finished up, probably just after voting closes. And then to round out the video, I will have quickfire thoughts on everything I've read, watched, listened to, reviewed, consumed over the past 8 weeks, and just kind of give you all of my thoughts. So I guess stay tuned for that soon-ish. But thank you for making it this far in the video, and I've had a whale of a time. So, it's finally finished. I mean, I make it sound like I wasn't having an absolute whale of a time these past 8 weeks, but we are now at the end of reading, watching, consuming, discovering stuff for the Hugo Awards. The votes are in. I have cast my votes, and I feel a sense of almost loss. Like, I've had a purpose going through all of this for the past 8 weeks, and we're done. I do wish that I'd had, I don't know if it was a case of I just like had reached my limit, or the fact I got ill, probably a combination of both, but I do wish I'd had a bit more time for at least the Lodestar category, and I would have liked to have had a chance to go over the game category, but it wasn't happening for me. But I think 18 out of 20 categories is pretty good going. I did manage to watch all of the films, and my thought was basically, are these really the best science fiction and fantasy films that came out last year? Because my gut instinct is no, but I don't know, honestly. And I'd love if people in the comments would let me know. So, what comes next? Well, next in the video, we are going to have quick fire. I will go through all 20 categories and give my thoughts on the nominees in the category. Although I suppose game I'll probably end up skipping, as I didn't get to play any of the games, but 2 minutes to each of the categories is my plan. Or roughly 2 minutes anyway. So that's what's coming next in this video. But in terms of what's next for me, well, Worldcon is next month, and fingers crossed I'm going to be attending, so I'll get to attend the Hugo Awards. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to film because this is my first and possibly only time attending Worldcon, but I'm hyped for it. Well, hyped, also anxious as anything. It'll be what it'll be, I suppose. But before that, I need to try and clear down my currently reading, as during the process of this, I've ended up currently reading over 40 books. So I'm planning on doing a cheeky little vlog of getting that down to not quite 0, because I've always got multiple books on the go, but getting it down to a bit more of a reasonable number. So that will be coming soon-ish. I think, I don't know if I've got any more stuff to say. I probably do, but I've forgotten, so there may be one more vlog update / editing Effie update after this one. But if not, straight into the quickfire thoughts on each of these categories. Hello. Oh, that was really weird. Hello and welcome to the somewhat quickfire, but if I'm giving 2 minutes to each category, it's still going to be about 40 minutes long portion of the video where I go through every category of this year's Hugo Awards. I know they're not all technically Hugos, but it's just easier just to call them all the Hugo Awards. Yeah, where I go through each of the categories and spend no more than 2 minutes talking about my thoughts and feelings on the things in the categories. In the category of Best Novel, we had The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi, The Saint of Bright Doors, Translation State, Some Desperate Glory, Starter Villain, and Witch King by Martha Wells. I don't know why I felt like I needed to specify the last one. I feel like there's multiple books called Witch King. I don't know, but we are already 30 seconds down. So this was a really interesting category to try and sort of decide between. I went into it having read 2 of the books in the category, Amina and Witch King, neither of which were winners for me. Amina, I feel like rep shouldn't be a spoiler or a reveal, so that was disappointing. It also felt very much like a first book in a series. So Saint of Bright Doors and Translation State, I enjoyed what I'd read, but I felt like I was still finding my footing at the point that I was like, okay, I need to move on, and realistically I know what my top 2 in the category were, and that was Starter Villain and Some Desperate Glory. But honestly, it felt like splitting hairs choosing between them, because they are so different, these 2 books. And Starter Villain is such a deeply unserious book in the best way possible. It's absolutely hilarious. It's set in the real world, but with some ridiculous concepts going on. And then we've got Some Desperate Glory, which is dealing with much more difficult and challenging subject matter, and has a very unlikable protag, but in the best way possible. In the category of Best Novella, we had Thornhedge, The Mimicking of Known Successes, Rose House, The Mammoths at the Gates, Life Does Not Allow Us to Meet, and Seeds of Mercury. Thornhedge was the only one that I'd previously read from this category, and I read it last summer as an ARC. Really good time I had with it, actually. I loved the way it subverted expectations, but it felt nostalgic and different at the same time. it was an enjoyable read overall. And then, I don't know, it felt like, aside from the mammoths at the gates, which was a pleasant surprise for me because I had read, I think this is book 4 in the Singing Hill cycle. So I'd read the previous books in the series and honestly, like, hadn't loved them. Like, they were fine, but I didn't connect with them. But reading this book physically, it made me realise that I think it was a format issue, but also it could just be the fact that this book is so grief forward, and I enjoy, as much as a person can enjoy, books about grief. I enjoy stories that explore that. But the other 4 novellas in this category felt like they didn't really grip me, and there was some questionable stylistic choices with the writing. Particularly disappointing was The Mimicking of Known Successes, which had a really strong prologue, but then in chapter 1 shifted perspective and just was a bit disappointing from there. In the category of best novelette, we had I Am AI, Ivy Angelica Bay, On the Fox Roads, One Man's Treasure, Introduction to 2181, Overture 2nd edition, and The Year Without Sunshine. This was actually a really strong category. I would say that, well, in fact, there was only one novelette that I didn't finish, and that was On the Fox Roads. And I think part of what didn't work for me was the fact that it felt very Americana, and what I'd read so far of it didn't feel very SFF, but I did only get about 41% of the way through. As for the other books in the category, it was quite a stacked category. Like, I loved the very emotional response to AI and the idea that someone might have to pretend to be AI in order to get work, and that was in the book I Am AI. Ivy Angelica Bay was quite strong in the second half, but I felt like the story went in a direction that I wasn't expecting. And whilst I do usually like a subversion of expectations, I felt like the story was weaker for that change in direction. One Man's Treasure was a really cool look at the intersection between magic and magical, whilst also tackling social issues, and handled time jumps really smoothly so that it didn't feel like it was being rushed. It felt like it took exactly the amount of time it needed to take. And Year Without Sunshine was possibly a little bit optimistic, but I liked that optimism. And then Introduction to 2181 Overture had a very sort of personal and emotional take, and I liked the way that it looked at, you know, cryogenesis, and looked at it as a way that it would not infinitely extend a person's life. And I've talked for way longer than 2 minutes, my apologies. For best short story, we had Tasting the Future Delicacy 3 times, How to Raise a Kraken in Your Bathtub, The Mausoleum's Children, Better Living Through Algorithms, The Sound of Children Screaming, and Antler's Journey. This was a very mixed bag of a category. I really loved Tasting the Future Delicacy 3 times. It was basically 3 interconnected stories about food and technology, and also had a little bit of a hint of cannibalism going on. And I loved that it had a bittersweet ending. Just overall, a very, very interesting and unique short story. How to Raise a Kraken in Your Bathtub was quite overt in its messaging, and it didn't work for me, I think, because it was so transparent in what it was saying, and I didn't get that sweet subversion. Mausoleum's Children just did not work for me at all. I have no idea what was going on, and it felt very bloated and confused. Better Living Through Algorithms was so optimistic and sweet and quite refreshing in a category that was overall filled with kind of heavy stories. The Sound of Children Screaming was another one that was a little bit opaque and in your face with the messaging, I think it would hit differently to an American reader, because from an outside perspective, people that don't, I mean, I imagine there's a large number of people in America that also think the whole gun situation is ridiculous. But as a non-American, like, you don't need to tell me guns are bad. Like, it was very weird. And then Ansel's Journey, I don't know if there was something lost in translation, but I was a bit confused. But overall, was a fairly decent short story. For the category of best series, I had to take a slightly different approach and just kind of started to read a bit of each of the series, because I'm sure I've said multiple times in this video, quite a slow reader. So it was really just getting a taste of each of these series. But I do feel like I got a good flavour for which ones worked for me and which didn't. So we had the Final Architecture, which I absolutely despised. It made my brain feel smooth and just wasn't for me. But I also think it was a point where I was like, oh, okay, maybe science fiction isn't for me. But no genre is completely not for me, but I don't know why it is in science fiction that does work, if that makes sense. The Imperial Raj, I don't know how that's pronounced. I had just read a little bit of Translation State, really loved, and yeah, it's a good time. Very, very thinky, but that was, I don't know what to say on that. October Day was incredibly readable and reminded me of the Adam Binder series by David R. Slayton. Just overall a good time. Laundry Files felt like something my dad would like, because it was very like maths and computery. The tone was enjoyable and very kind of light, but the science was a little bit over my head. Universe of Zuya, I was a little confused. I felt like, I'm pretty sure these are standalones in the same universe, and I felt like it was taking for granted knowledge on the reader's part, which was a shame. And Last Binding, I absolutely loved. I was basically immediately sold on. So, yeah. Am I getting less succinct as I go through this? I feel like I am. But anyway, we are on to Best Graphic Novel. Oh, no, Best Graphic Story or Comic category. So we had Beowulf, Saga Volume 11, Wonder Woman Historia, The Amazons, The Witches of World War II, Shubik Lubik, and The Three Body Problem. So straight off the bat, I will say that my top two, and I'm really surprised that something beat Saga out for my top position, but my top two were Shubik Lubik and Saga Volume 11. So Shubik Lubik, which translates, I'm so sorry, I'm probably butchering the Arabic, but it translates to Your Wish is My Command, and it's an alternative history story about where wishes were a real thing and they were mined. And, it was looking at colonialism through the lens of fantasy and this wish culture that had sprung about, but it was also a very intimate and personal story where we were told the stories of three characters through their journeys to get these wishes and whatnot. Saga Volume 11 obviously is the 11th volume in the Saga series, which I absolutely adore. It packed such an emotional punch and had a lot of like callbacks to things that we'd previously experienced. I do wish I'd been able to read the rest of the Saga series beforehand. Like, I have read like 1 to 10 previously, but it's been about 18 months. So I do feel like I was missing out a bit, but it reminded me of how much I loved Saga. Beowulf, I only got a sampler and I didn't love what I read in the sampler. Wonder Woman Historia, didn't love the ending, but from a technical standpoint, it was absolutely gorgeous, well done, fitting with the current zeitgeist, but it was very busy graphically. I have run out of time, but I'm just quickly going to say Three Body Problem, no idea what was going on, felt like it ended just as it was starting. And Witches of World War II, I absolutely despised. It was trash. In the category of best related work, this was kind of a mixed bag, because we had like videos, we had books, and it was a lot of stuff going on, but we had All These Worlds, A City on Mars, The Culture, The Drawings, Chinese Science Fiction, An Oral History, Discover X, and A Traveller in Time. So, two of these I wasn't really able to review because I didn't have any actual resources, and those were The Culture, The Drawings, and Chinese Science Fiction and Oral History. I do think the latter sounded really interesting, and I wish there was a translation because, like, yeah, it just sounded really, really good. Discover X, I think. I'm not sure if things were lost in translation or it's just a different cultural thing, because I did experience that with another category where I just didn't quite get it, if that makes sense. A Traveller in Time and All These Worlds were both kind of collections of book reviews, which are fine, but I think book reviews, you kind of need to be invested in the books it's reviewing. But I particularly disliked A Traveller in Time because basically you are reading obituary after obituary for this woman, and like, as cold-hearted as it sounds, I didn't really care. Like, I wanted to get into the meat of the book, and it was just like obituary after obituary, and no one wants to read that. A City on Mars was the surprise standout in this category because it was talking about, space travel and colonizing into space, and it was really unique and interesting, but also didn't take itself too seriously. Ooh, dramatic presentation, long form. So this is basically films, right? So we had Barbie, Poor Things, Dungeons and Dragons, Nimona, Across the Spider-Verse, and Wandering Earth 2. And I don't watch a lot of films, and I don't think I quite realised that I really don't keep on top of films until I was judging this category. And I was saying to my friend, are these really the 6 best films that came out last year? Obviously, it being a popular vote, like, they're just like the people who chose to nominate stuff. They're their 6 favourite, like, nominees in the category. But it was just a surprisingly underwhelming category. Barbie, I don't really have anything to add to the conversation about Barbie. Like, what I would say on it has already been said multiple times in terms of critiques. Nimona, I absolutely adored. Like, it hit so hard for me, and like, very clearly I was like, okay, this is my number one, obviously. Poor Things, I didn't like. It made me deeply uncomfortable. I think it meant to make you deeply uncomfortable, but I just, no. And the soundscape for it was too cluttered and made it even more uncomfortable to watch. Also, the accents, which I believe were deliberately bad, were so painful to listen to. Dungeons and Dragons wasn't fine, but it also wasn't amazing. It was just deeply mid, and I found myself kind of tuning out as I was watching it. Across the Spider-Verse, fine, but very much third film in a trilogy. Wandering Earth was a prequel, which I think would have hit better if I'd watched it as a standalone, because the stakes were nullified because it was a prequel and there was a lot going on, and it was a long film. It's like 3 hours long, and it was like crisis after crisis, and you just felt like, well, what's the stakes? Because you've got multiple hours remaining, and also because it's a prequel. Best dramatic presentation short form, which is basically TV shows. We had 2 episodes of Doctor Who, which were The Giggle and Wild Blue Yonder. Then we had 2 episodes of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which was These Old Scientists and Subspace Rhapsody. 1 episode of Loki, which was Glorious Purpose, which is the first episode of the first season. And 1 episode of, oh my gosh, The Last of Us, which was Long, Long Time. In a similar vein to the film category, I did wonder if these were truly the best episodes of science fiction and fantasy television that came out last year. I will say that I was kind of biased, and like, I didn't realise I was super biased, but I was kind of biased towards like Doctor Who because I love New Who. Like, I remember watching it as a teenager when it first came back. I remember my sibling, who was quite young at the time, just having a giggling fit when Doctor Who was on. Like, it's got a lot of nostalgia for me, but I also think that the 3 specials for is it the 60th anniversary? Really, or 65? I'm not sure now, but they really, really hit. I do wish that the first episode of the 3 had been nominated because that really hit, but I absolutely loved the giggle. I thought it was so well done. It was so heartwarming. It was brilliant, and I have literally just talked about Doctor Who. Let's add an extra minute on the clock here. So, Loki didn't work for me because I found it really difficult to get behind the concept of a Norse god who part of their whole mythos is the Norns who control. See, I'm sorry, my spouse is the Norse pagan, but like they have the concept of fate and destiny and stuff. So I found it really difficult for Loki to be like, oh, what's this sacred timeline? And it's like, but the Norns. So that didn't work for me. Also, I think because it's very much building on other MCU stuff, like it cannot be watched in isolation. Last of Us was fine. I'm still not totally convinced 3 episodes in. And then Star Trek was probably like 2 of my least favourite episodes of the season. Subspace Rhapsody was actually torture to watch, but musical episodes are so hard to pull off well, and this one was not pulled off well. And then These Old Scientists was interesting because it was kind of a crossover with Star Trek Lower Decks, but I didn't know at the time that it was actually a crossover. I thought it was just a unique take. It was fine, but I think there was better episodes in the series. So yeah, it was whatever. Sorry, I kind of rambled there. I am not going to talk about game because unfortunately I was in a position where I wasn't able to sit at my laptop and play any of these games. So I'm just going to say the nominees were Alan Wake 2, which sounded amazing. Baldur's Gate 3, which we've all heard amazing things about. Chants of Senna, which I hadn't heard of, but again, like, sounds really good. Dredge, which I'm deeply curious about, because, like, it's a fishing game, but it's more. Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, which, and Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which, again, whatever. I feel like getting into the next few categories was where it became really difficult for me to go, okay, how am I judging this? And, like, I got really into it and was like, yeah, but it's a popular vote. Like, it isn't that deep. So, the next category was Best Editor Short Form, and 2 of the nominees, finalists, I don't know, linguistically, 2 of the people in this category were editors who edit in Chinese, so I couldn't really judge, like, even if I'd got translations, things can get lost in translation and stuff. So I just had to go based on their editorial philosophy statements. But otherwise, we had Jonathan Strahan, who I read 3 short stories that he'd edited from the reactor.com website, and it was a mixed bag. Like, it was fine, but I didn't really get a feel for if he was a particularly strong editor or if these were just really good writers. Then we've got Lynn M. Thomas and Michael Damian Thomas, and I literally had no idea how to possibly judge them because they are the overseeing editor of their magazine, but didn't say what things they'd specifically edited. So it's like, are we giving them credit for the work other editors did? I know I'm being really judgy, but I was like, I don't know how to nominate, so I'm just going to have to be petty and judgy. Scott H. Andrews, who's... it's a question of, like, is it the writer or the editor kind of thing? And I thought the pieces that I'd read that he'd edited were very competent, which shows a good relationship between him and the writer, although I think the stories felt of a different era. And the final nominee in the category was Neil Clark, who I thought there was a smoothness and impressiveness to the stories that I'd read that he'd edited, and whether it was a case of he just happened to pick particularly good stories or he was really good at editing. Like, they're both talents, so props to him. In a lot of ways, the next category I had to kind of judge in the same way as series, in that I just had like a taste of each of the works and then went from there. And basically, I took my friend's advice, and so this is the category of best editor long form, and she basically was like, pick the 6 things that interest you most and then judge it based on like the best of what interests you, if that makes sense. So we had David Thomas Moore, who I read 10% Thief for, and it didn't really hit for me, unfortunately. Lindsay Hall, who I'd previously read Thornhedge, which I loved, and Bookshops and Bone Dust, which I didn't love. And I started A House with Good Bones. Kelly Loneson, which I read a good chunk of Sister Made a Monster, and I had an absolute blast. Loved that one. Roxy Chen, which I obviously had, well, not obviously, I'd read Some Desperate Glory for, was it the first category? Yeah, it was the first category. And that was like, I was having such a good time with Some Desperate Glory, so that was a thumbs up from me. Lee Harris, who has a lot under his belt, but I'd read Witch King, which I didn't love. I adore the Wayward Children books, and yeah, I don't know, it's a very weird mixed bag kind of category. And the final nominee was another editor who edits in Chinese, so unfortunately I couldn't really judge their capabilities. The next couple of categories were artists. So first up we had professional artist, and then fan artist is later on. But yeah, for professional artist, we had Alyssa Winans, Dan Dos Santos, Galandara, Michaela Alcino, Ravina Kai, and Tristan Elwell. Now, I'm not really going to dive into my thoughts and feelings on these, because art is incredibly subjective, and I don't think it's like right to critique them, especially because I am not competent or capable when it comes to art. So yeah, like, there was some really good artists in this category, and there was a few where I struggled to differentiate between them. But as I say, it's subjective, so what I loved, another person might not have liked, and what I didn't understand and dislike, someone else might have loved. For the category of semi-prozine, we had Uncanny Magazine, Strange Horizons, Escape Pod, Giganotosaurus, Corio, and Fire. And these are all, I mean, I think Escape Pod's slightly different because it's a podcast, but they're basically all a short story, zines. So they're collating, good short stories across the industry. Some of these are pretty well-known authors, some of them are less well-known authors. I did like that a lot of these had something that was their thing. So Korea was dealing with, I think it's Asian diaspora, which I know is obviously a whole continent and covers a lot, but I think it's deliberately quite vague, because diaspora is obviously going to mean different things to different people. Fire was basically a collection of short stories that showcase Black excellence, and that's obviously incredible to read. Giganotosaurus, I think, was a really interesting concept, because they pick one long short story each issue and they just kind of highlight that. Uncanny Magazine, I mean, my thoughts were basically that I'd read a few short stories, novelettes, etc. like, I'm so bad at what category things fit into. But I'd read a few for other categories, and I was like, if these are the best that are on show and they're not that great, then what does that say about this magazine? Strange Horizons was amazing, and I've run out of time. But yeah, it was a mixed bag. I mean, I don't usually read short stories, so it's always hard for me to truly judge. But then I did read some excellent short stories as part of this whole process. Ooh, best fanzine. So we had The Full Lid, Black Nerd Problems, Idea, Journey Planner, Nerds of a Feather, and Unofficial Hugo Book Club blogs. So The Full Lid, I did these categories in a different order than I'm talking about them, but I'd read some of The Full Lid for the category of, I think it's like fan writer he was under, and the writer is Alistair Stewart, and I thought he wrote in a really compelling way and made me interested in things I probably wouldn't otherwise be interested in. I did think it was interesting that in their statement as part of the voter packet, they were like, what we think is the core of us is Signal Boost. But Signal Boost, I think their intention didn't reflect on what I experienced, because I was like, it's just a list of things. Black Nerd Problems, I really loved. It was so insightful and accessible commentary on media that depicts blackness and the way that is impacted, impacts, and is a mirror to society. I found what I'd read so incredibly interesting, and definitely like wanted to read more, and probably would seek out to read it independently going forward. Idea felt disjointed and indulgent and just wasn't for me. Journey Planner is not something I would normally read, but I thought it was done quite well and was quite readable. Nerds of the Feather was competent but lacked some depth, and just, I don't know, there's a skill to writing a good review, and it felt like it wasn't quite there with these reviews. And then the Unofficial Hugo Book Club blog was so intriguing and exciting, and I had a really good time reading that. Ooh, Fancast was very interesting, because I'm not a podcast person, but as a result of a couple of these, I could see myself being a podcast person going forward. So we had Hugo's there, Octothorpe, Publishing Radio, the Code Street podcast, World Building for Masochists, and Science Fiction Fans Boomer. So Science Fiction Fans Boomer was, is generally in Chinese, but they did provide one subtitled episode. It's a video rather than just audio. I'm not quite sure what the point on their USP was, because we only had one episode. I would have liked to have just had a statement explaining what they are setting out to do. Like, it was a competent enough episode, but I just didn't get it. World Building for Masochists was fine. It was a little bit over chatty, didn't really get to the point, but it was interesting enough, this conversation with authors and the writing and whatnot. Publishing Radio was by far my favourite in this category. I loved the way that Sun Yudin and Scott, I can't remember his name, but the other author that's on the podcast kind of talked very openly about publishing things, and this is definitely a podcast I am going to be seeking out in the future, because I am just so interested in listening to it and kind of seeing a peek behind the curtain. Hugo's there was chatty and invited the reader in. I thought he could have been more succinct, but overall was fine. Octothorpe, I genuinely didn't want to stop listening. It was really enjoyable, humorous, personable, and it felt like you were being invited into the conversation and part of it, and it was just so nice. And Code Street podcast wasn't engaging. It felt like a lot of old men talking a lot of hot air. I feel like I'm being like super judgmental and bitchy, but it was so hard to like decide some of these. Oh gosh. The next category is fan writer, and it was like the first category I properly did. So like my notes, I've got so many notes for this category. And then by the end, I was so like, did not have much in the way of notes for each category, because I was like, well, I don't need to write a super lot. So our nominees for this were Bitter Corella, James David Nichol, Jason Sanford, Alistair Stewart, Paul Weimer, and Orjan Weston. So Alistair Stewart, I've already talked about because he writes for The Full Lid. He also writes for some other things that I've just abbreviated, so I'm not sure what they are. Overall, I thought he's very politically aware and on the right side of history. Not all the reviews worked for me, but generally he was very good at talking about things. And yeah, I would have liked to have seen more negative reviews, but I get that people don't necessarily want to put that energy out into the world, and that's completely understandable. Bitter Corella was Midnight Pals, which felt like lowest common denominator humour. It was kind of engaging to start with, but once I realised it was kind of a one-trick pony of ha ha ha, aren't these so like sexual, and it was just vulgar in places, and I did not vibe with it at all. Oh, I've just saw my note for James Davis Nichol, and he just says, yes, we may technically die in our sleep tonight, but was the reminder really, truly necessary? Straight to jail. Oh, gosh. I just thought he wasn't particularly polished, which is really hard to say because obviously, like, on a lesser extent, I'm also in the review space. So, like, reviewing other reviewers feels really weird, but I didn't vibe. Jason Sanford was a lot of interesting discussion around AI, and I was so captivated by his writing. Where's Paul Weimer? Is it over the page? Yeah, it's over the page. That's how many notes I had. So Paul Weimer, I thought, was very competent, but a little too verbose. And then Orjan Weston, I loved the way that he wrote like short fiction in, I think was it 280 categories? Or was it 140 characters, like basically tweet length stories, and they were so good, so on point, so enjoyable. 3 more categories to go. We're almost there. We're almost through this portion of the video. So the next category is fan artists. So again, I'm just going to say who were the nominees and move on because art is so deeply subjective. So we had Leia Rose, Dante Louise, A Spanish Sheriff, Ian J. Clarke, Sarah Felix, and Alison Scott. So the final two... Oh dear, have I jumped? I hope I haven't missed any categories. I'm now getting nervous that I've missed categories, but I don't think I have. So the final two categories were the Lodestar Award for Best YA book and the Astounding Award for Best New Writer. So for Lodestar, we had To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monoquill Blackgoose, A Benny Song by P. Jelly Clark, The Sinister Booksellers of Bath by Garth Nix, Unraveller by Frances Harjenge, Liberty's Daughter by Naomi Kritzer, and Promises Stronger Than Darkness by Charlie Jane Anders. So I'm going to be completely honest and say by the time I got to this category, I mean, as you've probably seen earlier in the video, I was pretty burnt out and I was only able to read like a little tiny bit of each of these nominees. I do think they were pretty decent, but again, the question has to be, were these truly the best YA books in the field of science fiction and fantasy that were released last year? I mean, Unraveller technically came out in 2022 in the UK, but I don't know. I don't really understand like qualification periods and stuff. So To Shape a Dragon's Breath, I loved the storytelling. It felt very in line with the oral tradition, and it was so welcoming and felt like you were sitting at a campfire hearing this story being told to you. A Benny Song, I only read like the first couple of chapters and it was fine, and I probably would enjoy reading it, more of it, but it didn't immediately suck me in. Sinister Booksellers of Bath, I didn't get a chance to review. Same kind of with Promises Stronger Than Darkness. I did start Victory's Greater Than Death, but it was reading really slow, I think, because it's got a US publisher and it's tiny font or something. I don't know. But I didn't go on to Promises Stronger Than Darkness. Unraveller, I was immediately captivated and desperate to read more. And then Liberty's Daughter, I thought, was an interesting take on, like, libertarianism, is that the right word? Gone to the extreme, and I'm intrigued to see where it goes, but like it's not a perspective I would normally see in stories. Our final category, we are finally here, is Astounding Award for Best New Writer. So the nominees in this category were Ai Zhang, Hannah Kana, Monoquill Black Goose, Sun Dean, MX Liu, and Sharon J. Zhao. And Sharon, this is technically their third year of qualification, which usually they wouldn't get. Sorry, that's B just coming in. I'll just wait for him to go. Yeah, so this was technically Sharon's third year qualifying, and usually they only have 2 years. But because of all the, mess that happened last year, they're getting an extra year of being able to be on the ballot this year. So Ai Zhang, I thought I was missing something at the end of Give Me English, but I absolutely loved I Am AI, as we saw earlier in this portion of the video. Hannah Kana, I enjoyed God Killer, and I will be reading Sunbringer soon, but clearly it hasn't left a lasting impression. I mean, all I remember from God Killer is Skedika, who I absolutely loved and reminded me of the Mogget from Garth Nix's Sabriel books. Monoquill Black Goose we talked about in the previous section and, really enjoyed. But it's really hard to judge a YA book against adult books. Sun Dean, I loved Book Eaters and had a good time reading it. And in my notes, I'm just like, come to think of it, I'm probably overdue a reread. MX Liu, I was really getting into the weird and unique stories because we had If Found, Return to Hell, and The Death I Gave to Him. And yeah, I don't know. They were both really good, and I'll be continuing. And then Sharon J. Zhao, I absolutely adored. Iron Widow was my favourite book the year it came out, and I'm so glad that they're on the ballot again this year. So that was 20 categories of the Hugo Awards or Hugo adjacent awards, sort of reviewed in under an hour. Well done me. If you're looking for any further clarification or thoughts on any of the nominees, feel free to chat to me in the comments. And as I said earlier, what comes next is I'm going to try and clear my currently reading, which was sitting at almost 50 books at the end of this 8-week period. And I am hoping to go to Worldcon next month, and we'll see if I get any footage from that. But if not, I guess you'll just have like a chatty talking head of my experience going to Worldcon, assuming I manage to make it, and anxiety, agoraphobia, all that fun stuff. But thank you for making it to the end. I really appreciate it. And until next time, love you. Bye.